Hi, I'm Judy Musa, a partner at Mojo Collaborative Communications. I'm speaking today with Jennifer Truesdale, CPO and president of Straighten Up, located in Charleston, South Carolina. She's a national board member of NAPO, the National Association of Productivity and Organizing Professionals. Today, we'll be speaking about back to school tips for kids and adults who are addressing the challenges of ADHD. Welcome, Jennifer. So, Jennifer, hi. Why don't you begin by telling just a little bit about yourself first?
Okay, sure. So before I became a certified professional organizer, my background was in engineering, and that built a great foundation for this career because I've accrued over 30 years experience in project and time management skills. I'm a continuous learner. I love learning, and aside from my certification credentials, I've also earned certificates in a broad range of subjects, from organizing and productivity to brain-based conditions, working with ADHD, life transitions, and several more dimensions. I'm also a 2019 graduate of the Coach Approach program that has significantly impacted the way I work with my clients. And coaching allows the clients to gain more self awareness, resulting in a more lasting change for the client. So that's how it's really affected me. I've received most of my post engineering education through NAPO University, and NAPO conferences. And I've been a member of NAPO since 2008, and I've been actively involved with them since joining. And as you mentioned, I'm currently serving on the national board.
Well, that's great. And you and I have spoken before, and you let us know that you work with all kinds of people who need home help at home and at work
Yeah.
with organizing skills and productivity. So it's interesting to ask you, like, how did you begin working with people who have ADHD?
Well, that's an interesting question. I've discovered over the years that many of my clients would just mention it to me in my initial assessment and that they have ADHD, which then opens that door for the discussion to get more insight into their challenges. But as I learned more about ADHD in my studies, it also became easier to recognize those challenges that my clients did face. I work primarily with adults, but I know that transitions, whether to a new grade or a new school, can be pretty scary and confusing. And I think last I read, there are over 6 million students diagnosed with the brain based condition of ADHD. And so for them, these changes can be really extremely challenging. Um, and many parents, they're turning to a variety of support services for their children, including like what we can offer as productivity professionals to help them manage their time and provide them with the tools to support their learning.
So you want to give us a couple of ideas about how you might be working with adults because that's something I didn't know much about, and I did not realize, obviously if you have this brain-based condition, it continues. You told me a little bit about a grad student that you had been
Yeah,
working with. Could you let
yeah.
us know more about that? That's kind of interesting.
Sure. One client I work with, she's a grad student. She is working on her PhD while coping with the ADHD challenges. And during COVID lockdown, we were working virtually with setting up her workspace from home because her change in her daily routine was really significant. And so she had to adjust to the different distractions around her. And with that lack of an in person schedule, she really struggled with staying on track and managing her routines. As you can imagine, there's a lot of moving parts a student has to keep track of. And she was using way too many systems in both paper and digital to manage her time and her data. And she was constantly feeling defeated in her efforts to manage her schedule and her studies, and as well as creating that time she needed for herself. She was just very overwhelmed. So fortunately, we had worked together prior in her home space, and it worked really well for her. So she knew sort of, by contacting me and asking for some guidance and another perspective, that we could work together to find some productivity solutions for her in-home study. So I suggested we started with some coaching, and that really helped her to identify what was and wasn't working. And then it created a lot of room for her to have some self discovery to reach new strategies and solutions together. So as we collaborated to find these best solutions for managing her time and her schedule better, We really addressed each challenge and found appropriate solutions based on her learning styles. So some of those areas, I think there was really about 5 areas for her task management. We found using a digital system for maintaining her long-term and short-term tasks was really easy for her, and it allowed her to shift and move those things around within the program quickly. For data management, we used both paper and digital, as she knew that handwriting her class notes was really significant for her because it helped her retain that information better. And then she would transfer it to a digital document later that would give her a second review to work within her own verbal written learning style. So that really was a successful discovery for her. And then also maintaining her data for all her research, we were able to compile it all into one digital system and then just recreated a new naming convention so that all the moving parts worked well together. For her time management, we incorporated a power hour every morning, and that was used specifically for her most significant priorities. And that allowed her to progress each day, reaching completion towards her goals. So if her day got, thrown off and everything was awry, she knew that at least she got some priority work done every morning. And so that was helpful. For staying focused, we incorporated a body doubling session called Focus Mate. It's a program that you can do online. And we incorporated that a few days a week for her, keeping her from getting off track on the tasks for her really heavy assignments. And then we also implemented a daily visual timer for her to use in small increments of time to keep her focused in shorter intervals. And then for staying balanced, we actually ended up shifting her whole work week based around the workload that she had at school. And it ended up, we gave her Thursdays off and Sundays she worked. So, it's really just about understanding that the way ADHD works, within your focus. It's important to understand that ADHD has multiple presentations, and so we can help tailor our services to meet our clients' needs with a comprehensive approach. It can involve combinations of organizing, productivity, and coaching.
So it sounds like you implemented, it sounds like five very specific things that I heard you say. So it was all about tasking, data, time, also staying focused personally. And then you talked about staying balanced. So really trying to do a holistic
Yes.
perspective of working with a person. That's really, really great that you can offer that kind of expertise. So, how do you think your work with people who have ADHD, like this particular grad student, differs from other clients that you've had?
Um, Honestly, the main difference for me, it's when I know my client has ADHD, I'm more hyper aware of what I'm, and looking for their challenges so that I can ensure we're creating really successful systems that are going to allow them to stay on task and finish their projects. We can work with their strengths and equip them with tools to be successful.
That's great. We talked a little bit about kids as well, and it sounds like you have tips for adults, but do you also have some tips for parents of children with ADHD as they go back to school shortly in just a few weeks?
Yes, I do. I actually have 5 really simple ones. Um, First one is if it ain't broke. So go back and review what worked in the previous school years and reflect on those successful habits and routines and what worked well for the student, and continue those same routines whenever possible. If they need to be developing all new routines, it's a new school, new environment. Start with breaking down their particular needs into categories such as what will the new school require or the new schedule require, like building new routines as needed and planning it out on a daily, weekly, monthly calendar. Tip number 2, stick to the schedule. You want to predetermine what the weekly schedule requirements are so you can plan for these blocks of time for work and study, and then also blocks of time for fun and relaxation. It's really important to note that it's critical for breaks for that brain refocusing. So some of the things you can do, you can start determining how you're going to identify your priorities. Are you going to make lists? Are you going to color code your tasks? Lots of different ways you can do that. And you also want to listen to the student. Let them help with the design so that they have some ownership in the routines that are established. And of course, that's age dependent, but you also want to plan for work in smaller increments, like 30-minute increments is optimal. 25 minutes of study, and then take a 5-minute break doing something completely different than what you were doing, allowing the brain to refocus. And then the third tip, adjusting to the new normal. Start preparing for these new routines a couple weeks in advance so the student has a chance to get used to their new schedule so their body can readjust. Sleep is most important. You want to make sure that they're getting 8 hours of sleep so you can figure out what time they're going to need to get up in the morning in order to be in school on time, and then work backwards. Count 8 hours backwards. 8 or 9 hours is when they should be focusing on going to bed so that they can be asleep and get plenty of rest. Also, nutrition. Nutrition plays a big role in energy levels and performance peaks. So, planning meals is important to maintain that healthy energy level throughout the day. Fourth, meet the teachers. Whenever possible, a student and possibly their parents, depending on their age and the grade they are, they should meet with their teachers in advance so that the educators can be informed of any challenges the student might face. They might be able to adapt or enhance their teaching methods to address those challenges. This varies depending on the age and the level of school, of course, but either the parent or the student can advocate for themselves to get that support that they need. When you're there and you're meeting the teacher, you can also take it upon yourself to do a mini orientation at the school so that the student can become familiar with the school grounds and the classrooms, where walk out his schedule or his or her schedule. Discuss ways that with the teacher that the child can stay on track in class and at home when they're studying. Teachers can also develop testing teaching methods using intervals for focus shifts. The parent or the student will want to confirm with the teacher or the school if something like this is offered. And then, of course, the most important, follow up with the teachers on their progress, because you want to make sure that what's in place is working before it's too late to make changes or change grades. You want to make sure that you're staying on top of that. And then fifth, entering the study zone, you want to make sure that you're preparing a dedicated study zone at home. You'll want to have all the essentials that they need. You'll want to make sure that you're in a location that's going to have minimal distractions. Standard supplies are going to be things, like your calendars and your daily planners, maybe an organizer for the supplies on the table or the desk surface, or maybe you have a desk and you have a drawer to have your supplies organized. Whiteboards or places to highlight priorities and due dates, and then supplies for keeping the information in order, whether you're going to use folders or binders or files. It's also important to not set up the area in a busy traffic space of the home or by a window for those distractions. Maybe the student is sharing the workspace with someone, so you can consider things like those large cardboard project boards. They're like trifold boards. You can stand those up on a flat surface and use them as a divider for visual distraction. You can also determine if having some white noise in the background will help block everything out for the student. But one thing that's really important as well is many times students with ADHD will be taking medications. So taking those medications at certain times of the day may affect how people, they're going to affect people differently. So plan study around when those medications are most effective. But all of these things, students are going to have varying organizing and productivity needs depending on, their age and their grade levels, as well as their different levels of understanding their own challenges with ADHD. So if they do opt for individual help, it would be customized based on the client's skills, their self-knowledge, and their learning style.
That's great. Thank you so much for telling us all about that. I'm going to say that we're at a point where we can really talk about how people are very different in their needs, and work towards a schedule that works for them, and having someone like you help them. So, anyone who's looking for more productivity tips and ideas, or needs an expert to help them along the way, There are plenty of people at NAPO that can help them. Jennifer is one of more than 3,500 experts in the arena. And these ladies and gents are really working very hard to help students of all ages with ADHD, as well as all kinds of productivity and organizing challenges. Thanks so much today for speaking with us.